So Kalen DeBoer has been on the job for about 2 weeks. What are the first impressions? Let's ask Andrew Bone from Bama Online.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's normally him, but I upgraded today. I got Andrew Bone from On3, same place, Bama Online. They do the best job in the business. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Luke. How you been?
Just barely perfect. I say that with all due sarcasm. It's been a whirlwind of 2 weeks. Nick Saban retires when I think he shocked the world, literally. Just get this question out of the way. I really want to get your impressions on Kalen DeBoer because Nick Saban's the old coach now. But, you were shocked by this, right?
I think the timing of it, yeah. Over the course of the last probably year and a half, we had heard some rumors behind the scenes that with just everything going on, the changing landscape in college football, that he wasn't a major fan of it, obviously. And I think with the transfer portal, that became a bigger issue. Not necessarily, going after people, but, you had star players on your own team that, having to sit down with coach after the season's over, trying to make the best decision for them and not really understanding, why these kids are trying to leave. But that's just kind of the nature of the business right now. And I think that kind of, played a role in it. I know he's come out and said that it wasn't a major factor for him, but I do think that was a factor, certainly. And it just kept becoming an issue year after year. So not necessarily completely shocked that he retired. The timing of it, yes. That day, that Wednesday was the first day of classes for Alabama. So you had all these freshmen that were on campus that were beginning their career in Tuscaloosa. And they go to their 4:00 meeting, which we talked to different people because it kind of got out there. Hey, there's a rumor Saban might be announcing his retirement, but we talked to enough people. We have enough sources that said, hey, that's not happening, which nobody knew. Nick Saban even came out and said he wasn't sure until 5 minutes before he did it. I think he shocked a lot of people, shocked a lot of coaches, support staff, everybody. Shocked me when he did it. But you go back, start thinking about it a little bit more, and you're not completely surprised. Obviously, there was going to be some fallout from it, which we saw with the transfer portal, people upset. Saw some decommitments. Ryan Williams immediately, which I'm sure we'll get into Ryan a little bit. But, obviously, negative reaction. People were upset and didn't know what to expect next. I've been in this business for 21 years. So I've been through a coaching change before at Alabama. Luckily, only one coaching change. This is the second one. A lot of other schools can't say that, but this was a big day. It was a big deal, and we'll certainly remember all the good times that Nick Saban provided, and all the for me, I'll just think back to all the recruiting wins, all the big moments, all the big surprises. Going back all the way to 2007, which he was only on campus for a month before he signed that first class, and then that 2008 class, which kind of set the tone for the next 16, 17 years. So unbelievable run. Glad to have been a part of it. Glad to have been covering the recruiting side of it, because that's what he was really known as, and he'll go down in history as, if not the greatest recruiting head coach of all time, not just the greatest head coach of all time.
Yeah, I feel your pain on the students and all that. My daughter is, I'm going to take her on a tour of Alabama on Friday, and she's going to be a senior next year. And she called me and was like, WTF. I was looking forward to having some Saban time. But regardless, maybe it's time for Kalen DeBoer now. What are your first impressions now that he's been on the job, about a week and a half?
Well, I think a lot of people gave him some grief right off the bat because you kept seeing all these kids entering the transfer portal, which that was going to happen. We knew there were a lot of guys that were going to enter the transfer portal the moment Nick Saban retired, whether it was this year, next year, 5 years from now. There was going to be a lot of fallout from the recruiting class to the transfer portal. But man, once he stepped foot on campus, the number one job, roster management, but also get coaches in place. You had to hire a staff. You had to get these guys on campus and let them get to work. And yeah, I think from the roster management standpoint, they had some losses, but they also had a lot of wins. I think that kind of gets lost in the shuffle because everybody just kept seeing all these graphics on social media of players entering the transfer portal and then committing somewhere else. But you actually dive into it a little bit. You look at the actual losses, and there weren't really that many losses per se as far as guys that were going to be impact players at Alabama next season. And the ones that were, I think Alabama was able to get some good replacements there. Caleb Downs probably the biggest one, obviously, but from talking to just different people around the program, talking to people outside the program, he was just incredibly torn. And the Ohio State deal, it's kind of funny talking to different people. And Georgia's side was so confident that he was going to Georgia, and I've seen all these different reports that have come out from Georgia reporters, saying he was 100% going to Georgia. Talking to people in Tuscaloosa over the course of the last few days, there was never any indication that he was going to Georgia from them. He told them straight up, "I'm leaving the program," and basically indicated where he was going, and it turned out to be true. I think he pretty much told everybody in Tuscaloosa, "I'm not going to Georgia," and everybody in Georgia thought he was going to Georgia. So pretty wild deal there. But now that Coach DeBoer has his staff in place, they are now out on the road. We've seen them on Monday offering a few top kids in the country, the kids that you want to offer. Juju Lewis, 5-star quarterback. Deuce Knight, who is committed to Notre Dame, quarterback out of Mississippi. Jared Curtis, another quarterback in the 2026 class, number one quarterback in the country. We are seeing them hit a lot of different high schools. They had a big recruiting weekend. They got some transfers in. The Austin Mack deal. I don't necessarily think Austin Mack played a major role in Julian Sang's decision to leave. I think Julian probably, I don't want to say he was already out the door, but I think he was probably thinking about it. And Coach DeBoer is going to make, he's trying to make this team better. He wants to make sure that, the team's set up for the future. And if there's going to be some guys that could potentially transfer, he wants to go ahead and bring some guys in that can replace them. So I think with Austin Mack, they're really excited. I don't think they would have brought him in if they didn't have a lot of belief in him, because they've worked with him for a year. I mean, he's been at Washington. I think if he was bad, they would leave him there. They wouldn't have tried to recruit him to Tuscaloosa. So, seeing his size standing next to Ty Simpson the other day, obviously he's a big kid, probably the biggest quarterback that we've seen at Alabama in quite some time. 6'6", 230 pounds, incredible athlete, but he's going to have some competition, and and he may not be ready for another year or two. So wait and see there. I think obviously adding some more good pieces from the transfer portal. Very important.
Wait, Andrew, I'm gonna let you talk about them here in the next segment, because right now I need to tell everybody about FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. The NFL regular season's over, it's done, especially for the Cowboys and the Eagles and people like that. But the playoffs are hot and heavy. And right now you can get, as a new customer, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's hard to beat. That's $150 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose. Not a lot of places are going to let you do that. The app is so easy to use. Jimmy Stein can use it. And there's so many different ways to bet. like live same game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find those popular parlays, and much, 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 much more. So visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup or a chip shot field goal or a Nick Dunlap putt. All those things are very, very easy. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. So you were about to get into some of the Washington transfers, and that's where I was going to go next. Parker Brailsford coming in. Look, Andrew, call me crazy. I said this on the podcast. I'm going to say it tonight on another show I do. I will say it till I'm blue in the face, and people can say I'm just a Bama homer or whatever. If Alabama had Parker Brailsford last year at center, they win the national championship. Now, I'm not trying to take a shot at Seth McLaughlin. What I'm trying to do is say, if, let's call a spade a spade. If you remember, I remember the Ole Miss game pretty vividly. We're first and goal on the 1, I think, and we snapped the ball over his head. There is no gravedigger play if there isn't a bad snap. And then of course, in the second half of the Michigan game, Alabama's got a nice thing going, 2 bad snaps in a row. And next thing you know, all the momentum's dead. And then, of course, not to say anything about the last snap of the game in that Michigan game. I'm not picking on Seth McLaughlin necessarily. I'm not. And I also understand, I know it sounds that way. I also know how insane it sounds to say a center makes the difference in the national championship, usually as a quarterback or maybe a defensive lineman or a linebacker or something. But I believe this, and I believe Parker Brailsford is a fantastic player, and I can't wait to get him on campus. I feel like he solves a problem for Bama.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely solves a problem for Alabama. Seth McLaughlin obviously entered the transfer portal, but went to Ohio State. Alabama was going to go into the spring not knowing who the center was going to be. You have some guys coming back that will be competing, but getting a kid that was second team All Pac-12 as a redshirt freshman, was a freshman All-American, only allowed 1 sack in a pass-heavy offense. Pretty impressive. Was the second highest graded center in the country this past season. I think Alabama fans should be extremely excited about this guy. And I've seen some different posts about his size and how he's not going to be able to hold up in the SEC. Well, he held up pretty fine against Texas when I watched him in that game. Against two All-American defensive linemen that are absolute monsters, Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat. So he was pretty impressive in those games. So I think 6'3", 275 pounds. Now he's going to have to, I think, obviously put on maybe a little bit of weight, but that's manageable. But he's also a guy that plays with great leverage, strength, power. Has great technique. You look at, and I'm not trying to compare him to
Andrew?
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, but
yeah, I can.
Jason Kelsey up in Philadelphia, similar size. Like I said, not trying to compare the two, but I think that's kind of overblown a little bit. If you can play with great leverage, great technique, you have great strength. He's going to be able to hold up. And, going into the spring, you got to think. Coach DeBoer, that staff's very excited about having him because you also have a guy that knows the play calls, understands their system, has worked with offensive line coach Scott Huff. So yeah, I mean you have a great presence on the interior. Got to figure out the tackles. Elijah Pritchett probably has a leg up right there, at one of the tackle spots. But who else is going to step up? Do they potentially go after another player in the transfer portal? Either right now, which we don't know if there's really anybody out there right now, but maybe a little bit later down the road. What if another job? What if another school has the similar effect that Alabama just did? They might lose their head coach. Opens up the door for more guys to enter the portal, or you just wait until the spring and have some options there. So we'll see how that all transpires. But yeah, I mean, I think they're doing a great job in the transfer portal so far. Still a few guys out there that they'd love to get, including Jabbar Muhammad, who took the official visit this past weekend number one cornerback in the portal. And that was probably the biggest area that Alabama had suffered some losses was in the defensive backfield with Trey Amos, Antonio Kite. Saw some other guys, but a lot of guys that weren't necessarily penciled in as starters. Maybe Amos, but some of these other guys that entered the portal weren't returning as starters. They were hoping to make an impact this spring or in the fall to get on the field. But Alabama's going to be all right. I think when the dust settles, they're going to still have a pretty stacked team. When you look at the transfer portal, the guys that left, I think the most impressive thing to me are all the guys that stayed. Because there was a lot of guys on this team that could have entered the portal, could have left. There was probably a lot of back channel deals that were being tossed around to them, not necessarily directly to them, but to family members, to high school coaches or whoever. Hey, we can get this guy this deal if he decides to enter the transfer portal. That was probably happening, and you had a lot of leaders step up in the last week. I really like what Devontae Smith said, basically after sitting down with Coach DeBoer, basically said, if you decide to enter the portal after sitting down with Coach DeBoer and listening to his plan, you are an idiot. And then from talking to different people, talking to different recruits that have met with him, and seeing how excited Ryan Williams was after his official visit this past weekend about Coach DeBoer and staff and the plan, I think Alabama fans need to be really excited. They've got a guy in here that is going to go to work, is going to be aggressive. We've seen that on the recruiting trail this week. Some people were upset last week that Coach DeBoer and his staff weren't out recruiting. They couldn't. They weren't because of contracts and everything. They weren't allowed to go out and recruit. Somebody said, well, I'm glad that Josh Chapman and Clinton Dix and all these guys are out on the road recruiting because nobody else is. Well, they were doing it for those guys because they had to. And who else would you want out there besides some guys that have a bunch of national championship rings? So props to those guys for getting out on the road, helping Alabama during that week, during that transition, when you were trying to get coaches in place, when you're trying to get coaches under contract, you're trying to get them out of their contract and out of their buyouts from the other schools that they were at. Now they're all in town. Now they're on the road. Now we're seeing them be pretty aggressive on the recruiting front. And I think it's turning out pretty well so far.
Definitely. And boy, that's a great point about it under the contract stuff. I mean, there's some people that just don't know that, and they just assume, hey, this guy doesn't get the South or whatever. So if everybody will take a breath, understand, we haven't even had properly time to mourn the loss of Nick Saban. And everybody can say, well, he didn't die. Well, a piece of me died. So how about that?
I do wonder what the LSU message boards were saying back several years ago when Nick Saban was hired as the head coach down there about his recruiting presence in the SEC, because he didn't have much, or Urban Meyer when he went to Florida. People probably were upset that those guys were hired as head coaches and didn't really have any connections to the South. So, and by no means am I trying to compare Coach DeBoer to Coach Saban or Coach Meyer, but you got to give them a chance. Let them go to work. And I'll tell you what, they're able to pull off Ryan Williams in a month of being on campus. That's an impressive job.
We're going to talk about that right when we get back. Yeah, so I want to talk about Noah Carter too, so sneak that in. I don't want to treat him as an afterthought. I think Noah Carter is fantastic. He had some great all-star, and he actually moved up in the rankings, I believe, Andrew. So Noah Carter from Arizona, rush end that is hopefully Alabama gets, and he's fabulous. But, I mean, everybody's asking about Ryan Williams. I mean, we could do the podcast every day on Ryan Williams, and I'm going to leave you with it. But I want to say this because you probably hadn't heard it. I've said it on the pod several times. I've called a lot of Alabama, Mississippi All-Star games, called a lot of state championship games here in Alabama. There have been two players that I have seen. Now, I didn't get to see Julio Jones in the All-Star game. I didn't get to see did he even play in the Alabama, Mississippi All-Star game? You remember?
He did. He actually he had turf toe all week.
That's right. That's
So
right.
he tried to play a little bit, but it was kind of a rough go at it that week.
But okay, so there've been two players. I mean, maybe two and a half now that I think about it. That I said these guys are going to be superstars. I don't care where they go, what they do, they're going to be fabulous. Chris Jones from Mississippi, who starred at Mississippi State, and I remember him vividly because Alabama was pursuing him hard, and he ended up just honoring his Mississippi State commitment. He started out like a 3-star, and then everybody's like, we have misevaluated badly. Rashawn Evans is the one I'd say probably a half because he had an incredible Alabama Mississippi All-Star game.
Yeah, that was
But
outstanding.
Ryan Williams is the other one. Ryan Williams is the one that I mean, I'm just telling you, this guy's going to be a pro. He's just got an it factor about him. He's not necessarily the biggest or the fastest, though he's plenty big and plenty fast. But it's just he's got one of those things about him, like David Palmer, like just he just knows he's going to beat you, and he beats you. It's not like it's cocky if he does it, but you got to feel better about Alabama's chances right now, right?
I think so. A lot better about their chances than we did a week ago when he, or 2 weeks ago when he decommitted from Alabama. When he decommitted, and that was probably, a reaction, obviously, to Nick Saban's retirement. Upset. Nick Saban's all he really knew, and I said this on Bamaonline the other day. Talking to a former player that was in Alabama, that was in Nick Saban's first recruiting class. At Alabama, and he told me, he said, think about these 17, 18-year-old kids, even some of these kids that are in college now, all they've known about is Nick Saban in Alabama. They haven't, they've never seen a coaching change in Tuscaloosa. They've been watching Alabama dominate the college football world for, many, many years, their entire lives pretty much. So when the head coach retires, there's going to be a lot of people that are upset, people that are on the team, people that are committed, people that had Alabama maybe as their top school of choice before it happened. And all of a sudden, your head coach, the reason you love that program, they're now gone. So I think with Ryan, he reacted pretty quickly. Not necessarily surprised by the quick decommitment, and everybody thought that he was not. There was no chance of Alabama being able to salvage things, but man, did they knock things out of the park with that hire? Because I mean, you bring in him, Coach DeBoer, and Ryan Grubb. You have two wide receivers in your system that had over 1,000 yards receiving last season. You have those two guys plus another. You're gonna have three guys that are probably going to go in the top 50, top 60 of the NFL draft at the wide receiver position this year. That's a good selling point to start off the bat. And he knows that. Ryan knows that Coach DeBoer, Coach Grubb, they're going to get the ball to their playmakers' hands. It's a quarterback, wide receiver friendly offense, and sitting down with them, learning more about them. I think Ryan was really impressed. I think having people around the program still is also a big benefit. He may have lost T-Rob, and the thing is, a few months ago we were talking about Holman Wiggins and how he left for Texas A&M, and how that was not necessarily a major blow in Ryan's recruitment, because Ryan's one of his biggest relationships was with T-Rob, Travaris Robinson, who left for the Georgia co-DC job. Everybody said that if T-Rob left, it would cause a major issue with Ryan. Well, he left, and Ryan still came back to Tuscaloosa twice over the course of the last week. He was in Tuscaloosa last Tuesday, met with the staff for the first time, then was back in Tuscaloosa for the official visit. I'm not going to make a prediction just yet. We'll do that a little bit later on. I'd like to see how the official visits go to Texas this weekend, and then that big one to Auburn that final weekend before he makes a decision on February the 9th. But I think as of now, you've got to feel a lot better about Alabama's position with Ryan, especially all the reaction and posts that we saw from him on social media over the last few days. Saw an article from AL.com about his visit, and it was all positive. I think if you're an Auburn fan, you're probably a little bit concerned based on the comments that he's made, but you also know that he's still coming to visit you. He's still going to be on campus. There's still going to be a lot of attention on him, and there's going to be some last minute pitches there, and he's going to have to sit down, make the best decision for his future. But there is a lot of love for him in Alabama. Still calls Alabama his second home. So we shall see.
And here's the good news about the crazy way college football is right now. If you don't sign him this year, you may sign him next year.
Sure.
I mean, it's just bananas out there right now. And Andrew, I'm going to let you get out of here, man. You're the best in the business. Go check out Bamaonline. They do a marvelous job. They do the best job, if you ask me. They got the best crew over there. Tim Watts, Andrew, of course, Jimmy Stein as well. And they're just knocking it out of the park. There's so much to digest right now. Really quickly, how do you feel about Alabama's chances tomorrow night against Auburn in basketball?
Whew, Auburn's good. I mean, they are fantastic. I think Alabama playing at home, coming off a loss, they're going to have to hit their threes. Their threes aren't falling. It may be a long night for them, but yeah, I mean, playing a home game, coming off that loss, the Coliseum's going to be rocking. They can pull off the upset, but it's going to be tough. Auburn's a really good basketball team.
It's funny, the ESPN game predictor, which is, worth exactly what I say it's worth, nothing. But it has Alabama as like a 64% chance to win. I'm going to guess that Auburn's going to be a slight favorite. I think the only couple of things, like you said, Nate Oates even pointed this out, when Alabama has a really bad game, they generally follow it up with a really good game. Of course, they followed it up with a really good game against teams that aren't as good as this Auburn squad. And I'm not trying to discount Auburn in the least, because I do think they're very good. They may be the best team in the league this year. But they don't have a quad one win yet. And I think Alabama's their only quad one game since game one. So, it's going to be interesting. I think Alabama certainly got a chance. Going to be a lot of fun to watch it and see how this thing unfolds.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to watching it. I think that Alabama playing some tough, obviously non-conference games early on, didn't win many of those games, but I think they played those games to get them ready for the SEC, and that's going to be the big, obviously one of the biggest tests so far.
All right, buddy. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. We will be back tomorrow with more, hopefully with Jimmy Stein, or maybe hopefully with Andrew Bone again. Who knows? Actually, hopefully with Jimmy Stein. We need him back. But Andrew, you did a marvelous job today. Appreciate you so much, and roll tide, buddy.
All right, Luke. Thanks. Thank you, buddy.